Hi, welcome back to another Designers Discuss. I'm Sean.
And I'm Aubrey.
And we are product designers here at Crema.
Designers Discuss.
If you're new here, Crema is a digital product agency, which means we help companies all over the country design, build, and grow new technology solutions and the product teams that build them.
Today we're discussing what the role of a product designer looks like at Crema and how that role will evolve in 2019.
And stay tuned to the end of the video where we talk about the top 3 design trends we see happening in 2019. So the whole reason we're making this video is because depending on where you look, the role of a product designer or digital product designer can be super confusing, and everybody sort of has a different take on it. So we'll sort of throughout the video define what that looks like at Crema, but maybe it's helpful to talk about sort of, our introduction to product design.
Before starting at Crema, I never really understood exactly what it meant to be a fully encompassed product designer. I knew what user experience designers were and user interface designers, but I never really understood the whole group of it.
Yeah.
Previously, I was in graphic design, eventually specialized in web design, and then became interested in products.
Yeah.
But I always thought I didn't want to go into product design because I would only be able to do one of these things that I liked, but
Yeah.
I liked doing all of them.
Yeah. That's so crazy that's your experience, because my background is even more different than that. It was like architecture and urban planning.
Right.
So it was super traditional design work where you're like using a pencil and things like that. We didn't even touch computers. So everything I've sort of done has been learned, but I didn't even know those individual roles existed. I sort of only knew about the singular product designer role that encompasses all of those.
Right. Well, I still feel like even though you're not from a specific design background, that could really help you in what we do, especially when it comes to like planning and flows. That all kind of ties into the first part of what we do as product designers with information architecture.
Yeah, so information architecture, perfect segue into what we think a product designer looks like at Crema. And it's like basically 4 main practices, which starts with information architecture, and then we have user interface design, interaction design, and user experience design.
Right.
So that's a mouthful. And as we already said, those can be individual roles, so we can break those down a bit here for you.
Information architecture is really the structure of information in a website and the different elements within it and how those different sets of information elements flow and connect together as a whole. Information architecture is honestly my favorite part of the entire process because it's a lot about problem solving and trying to figure out how to make a lot of different options come out as seamlessly and simply as possible. So it's a really interesting problem-solving experiment, which when I originally went into design, I never thought that as a designer I would get to work with that sort of strategy and whatnot. So it's really fun.
Yeah, and I think we even like mentioned it in an earlier Designers Discuss video. Like there was a myth that like the first part of the design, like that strategy part, is easier than like doing it in Sketch or on a program, which I think we ended up saying they're almost equal or maybe more heavily weighted toward the beginning, because that is where all that problem solving happens. And if you can get that information architecture right the first time, it just makes the rest of the product design happen a lot more fluidly.
Right.
I think
It's kind of like a progression. If the first part, which is information architecture, doesn't turn out well, then the rest of your product is not going to work out well either.
Yeah.
You have to have, for the first step, you have to have a good setup, and then as you move on to user interface design, you also have to have that work out the right way to be able to continue into the project. So they all really tie together and work as one at the end of the day.
And that's why I think it's important to have this information architecture at that base level. So here we're starting with that one discipline. So now like to layer on top of that, we have here is user interface design.
A lot of people think about user interface design. They think about how does it look? Is it pretty? Do we like those colors? Is the aesthetic good? And it's good to be engaging with the user in that way, but an even bigger part of user interface design is actually making an engaging experience that leads users to make the right decisions and help them in making those decisions to make it as effortless as possible. It's always about pushing the boundaries and trying to get to what comes next without recreating the wheel. So the things that work don't change the system because users get used to things like navigation placement and the sorts of conventions like that. But there are a lot of areas where you can still really push things forward without making it a non-consistent experience for the user. Yeah,
and something we were just discussing last week is sort of the rise of all of these voice-controlled things, and weirdly enough, that is a sort of a user interface, thinking about how you interface with, it's not a visual interface, but like how you actually interact with these voice controlled things. So I think as we might see a move away from sort of like this physical phone screen to the sort of ambient computing devices,
Right.
there's a lot to be done there. And I was even thinking like the original fingerprint scanners on phones, like how awful was that to do? Like
Right.
that's like interfacing with your phone, and this gets to user experience as well because they're so closely tied. Is like what a horrible experience that was, but now you just pull out your phone and it's like sort of a seamless experience. So
Right. And
there are so many things like physical, like verbal or digital that can all be, I think, considered an interface.
so a lot of the things you just covered for user interface also tie into interaction design. So a big focus of interaction design is creating a relationship between your product and the user. So one of the main rules I have when going about interaction design is whenever you have your user give you something, you give them something back. And so this kind of leads into something I know George has talked about before in videos, which are habit loops. So actually giving them a cue, which then a routine, and then they get the reward. And so that creates a really good user experience because it makes people interact with your products very seamlessly. It just becomes a routine, and then they know at the end of the day they're going to get back something from what they give you.
Yeah, I mean, feedback, especially with like a digital product that's flat, not really tactile, that either like a visual feedback and those kind of like give back to the user is super important.
Yeah, I mean, and interactions can be delayed as well. So something like when someone goes onto Instagram, they post their photo, and then that's the routine, and then the reward is them being able to get those likes. And so it's like you can create routines and rewards in ways that aren't just like click a button, have it change a color. It can really be a lot more in depth than that. So it's not just surface level. It's like very thorough as far as what interaction design can mean.
That's a great point. It brings you back into the application.
Right.
And you're interacting with it long after you've done your main interaction.
Well, right, because at the end of the day, the user experience is about how a user feels when they're actually using your product. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the core element of what user experience is about. So as well as we lay out information architecture and all those other elements, if we can't actually have the rest of the team together contributing to that, and then on the development side actually bringing that to life, it wouldn't mean anything without all those pieces working well together. So in a way, our kind of compartments are the same kind of idea as the compartments that bring together a good user experience. We do the same within our teams.
Like physical teams.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
So when I was making the transition from web into product design, I had a hard time really understanding how all these different parts came together. So the way I've always thought of it is that information architecture is like the blueprint of an office building. So when they lay out an office building, they group the different departments together, and then within those departments, who needs to be near each other as well so they can interact easily. So it's really about laying things out in a way where the different flows and connections can happen as easily as possible, which is the same for actually building a digital project. Then when it comes to the user interface of it, if you go to a new building for the first time, how are you going to know how to get to the elevator, the bathroom? You have to have good, efficient wayfinding signage, and then you also need to have it in places where people know where to find it. Is it large enough? Can people read it? If you go into a building and wayfinding's on the ceiling, you're never going to find it. When it comes to the user interface, not only do you have to lay out information that flows well, but you also have to do it in a aesthetically pleasing way. So you also, when you go to a new office building, you always enjoy it if it's well designed, it's new, it's fresh. You enjoy those things, and you're going to remember that, and it's going to contribute to a better experience there in the long run. As far as interaction design goes, things such as opening a door. How does the door open? Does it open like a normal door? What if you show up at a building and the handle is on the top of the door and you have to climb up, grab it, and pull the door down to get in? No one would know how to get inside.
Yes, or what's more is Norman doors, when you just discovered the term. It's the doors that have bad affordances, like they have a pull when it's really a push. So those are bad user experiences or interaction design.
So we have these systems of how things work, like opening a door. And so we keep those things consistent so users know what to expect at the end of the day. So you want to change things enough to keep them exciting, but not so much people don't know how to use them. And then finally, the overall user experience. So when you take the layout of the building, apply the wayfinding signage, the aesthetics, and then all the interactions you have within that building, that creates an overall user experience. So when you go to a place and you think, I love that place. I so want to go back there. The new cool spot in town, those sorts of things, all contributing together to a good overall user experience that's going to make you want to go back and breed a loyal user, just like good user experience on the product design side breeds loyal customers.
Yeah. So there you go, a real world example of a digital product. So looking out at design trends more broadly in 2019, what do we see sort of happening?
So I think a big push for digital products in this upcoming year is going to be simplifying our lives by having to make less decisions and getting less decision fatigue. The way you go about that is by sometimes making some of these processes more automated and a little bit less human. Now, the idea of that sounds a little scary, but at the end of the day, the goal is to make our lives simpler and easier.
I like it.
So the first thing is anticipatory design, and that is really about creating products that are anticipating people's needs in advance, and so helping them make better decisions faster. Some examples of anticipatory design would be things as simple as Google search. When you're looking to search for something, it's giving you these automated suggestions of what they think you might be looking for.
So I mentioned it sort of in passing just a second ago is automation design. So that's another big piece. That's number 2, automation design.
Right.
Now that is different than anticipatory because it requires me as a user to set up something in advance.
Yeah, so basically the way automated design works is generally at some starting point, you will do an initial setup, and then from there on out, everything's automated. So automation design is really about creating an environment, not where you're anticipating things for a user, but where you're actually setting it up so they never have to make a decision.
Yeah, which is how, doesn't everyone want to live their life like that? Just walking down the street, making no decisions. Yeah, so great examples of that are, I don't know, anything smart home, my thermostat or my lights know that I'm home. I've set it up in advance to say when I get home at 6 o'clock, turn on the thermostat, turn on the heat, turn on the lights, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so exactly what you said. And another element of that is really taking this user experience of that automated design and bringing it out into the real world. Yeah. So it's just, it's another even step further than just doing that in apps. It's actually bringing it out so you can actually experience it in your everyday life.
Totally. So that's sort of like the third point, which is really closely tied to both automation and anticipation. Is the third is the real world user experience. Right. Yeah, and which is becoming super common with all of the ambient computing devices like your Google Home Hubs or whatever variation of Alexa device you have. So you're still interacting with these things, and there's a whole user experience there. And if it's poor, again, you won't use it. I remember years ago we had an Alexa device. My wife thought it was fine on us, and it ends up it was. They're always listening. They're always creepy. So we threw it out. But 2 years ago, it was okay. It was pretty good. But I was still pretty amazed at talking to this device. So the user experience was getting there, but it wasn't great. But they're pretty phenomenal these days. Yeah, and that's why they're so prevalent. They're dirt cheap, and they work really well, and people intuitively know how to interact with them. So I think, I think there's a lot more room for growth in the sort of the real world user experience there with more of these devices becoming available.
And even going further than that, bringing user experience in the real world could be something as simple as there's a new banking app called Aspiration Bank, and they actually don't even make you pay for ATM fees regardless of what ATM you're at. So when you go to an ATM, you're not I have to pay an extra $3 for this, regardless of what ATM you go to. So it's creating a good user experience because when the user goes and takes out money, they feel good about it, which relates back to their product, even though it's not happening inside the app itself. Yeah, it's freaking nuts. Because who wants to pay more money on top of the money they're already taking out? So that's a great point. So that's what we think it looks like to be a product designer here at Crema and in 2019. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe and like for more videos of us in the future.